The administration has been told that they need to make sure that SNAP is funded, but will they comply? That's always the question. Hi, I'm Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and this is The Breakdown. Make sure to hit subscribe so that you can get all the updates at the intersection of politics and law right here at Legal AF. So, today, I'm talking about a program that feeds 1 in 8 Americans, likely your neighbor. And these are mostly kids, senior citizens, and working families. Y'all have probably heard the colloquialism of food stamps, but the official name is SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's been basically the bedrock. It's been like the backbone of the fight against hunger in the US. But of course, there's a lot of myths that surround it, and we often don't really think about the law behind it. So I'm going to break all of that down and then talk about ways that you can support your neighbors during this crazy time. So first off, what is SNAP and what are the laws governing it? So SNAP is a program that's a federal nutrition program, and the people that are in charge of it is the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA. And so what the program does is that it gives eligible low-income people and families with, they give them money, and it's basically loaded onto an EBT, an electronic benefits transfer card. So it's basically looks like an ATM card, right? A debit card. But the difference is it can only be used for food. Can't be used for a new stereo, can't be used at, to get other random stuff. It can only be used for food at specific retailers. So you can't just roll up anywhere. You have to go to one of those specific stores to be able to use the card and get food. It is not cash. So it's not like you could take it to the ATM and withdraw some money. It's purely you give it at the authorized store in order to get food, and the money's deducted that way. So it never hits the hands of the people that are the beneficiaries. So the law that governs SNAP is the Food and Nutrition Act of 2008. So this is a law that was updated from the original Food Stamp Act of 1977. And the Food and Nutrition Act is periodically reauthorized through the massive multi-year legislation known as the Farm Bill, right? So okay, you've got the Farm Bill. That's the vehicle to make sure that every so often this program still exists. And the program is $100 billion, right? So this is not like a tiny bit of change. This is a massive amount of money because it's a massive program trying to help so many people. So in terms of eligibility, how do you get food stamps? How do you get SNAP? So there's 2 tests, and it's all based on income. There's the gross income test, which means the household's pre-deduction income must be at or below the federal poverty line, but by 130%. So in other words, for a family of 3, looking at the new cost of, adjustments for 2026, basically a family of 3 has to bring in $2,888 per month. So just imagine 3 people living on less than $3,000 a month. Yeah, so that's one income test. The second income test is the net income test, which means after all the allowable deductions, so like your rent, utilities, childcare, critical costs, after you take all of that out of the paycheck, your remaining income must be at or below 100% of the federal poverty line, the FPL. So same way, you may be one person, but by the time, you still don't make great money, but you make a little bit of money. But then by the time, you live, let's say, in an expensive city like San Francisco, New York, by the time your rent comes out, by the time you've paid your light bill and everything else, and then, you dropped your kids off at daycare, you're basically left with fumes. So in that instance, then you may be eligible for SNAP benefits. So the whole mindset behind that is that a family should only be spending 30% of their net income on food. And of course, if the family has no income, they receive the maximum amount, and that's just sort of the end of that. So who is actually on SNAP? Who is using this program? So the number of folks that benefit fluctuates, but most recently, the most recent estimation is 42 million people. 42 million people each month. So that means 1 in 8 Americans is on SNAP. And the majority of the people that benefit are children, the elderly, people with disabilities. So I just want to squash one major misconception right now. Some people are thinking that SNAP is only for people who aren't working. So they have this image of the quote unquote welfare queen who's just sitting around watching, the whatever, daytime TV and stuffing their face full of potato chips, right? There's that mindset, and that could not be farther from the truth. The reality is the majority of the people that are on SNAP are the working poor. So take this example. You've got a single mom. She's got 2 kids, and she makes $15 an hour working at a big box store. She's working 40 hours a week. But at the end of the day, the math is still not mathing, because you're working full time, even with your schedule. If you're looking at medical expenses for yourself and your kids, high childcare costs, your income can still fall under the 130% of the federal poverty line threshold. In other words, bottom line, you're working, but the math ain't mathing. You've got this job, you're going every day, you're doing everything you're supposed to do, but that money is still not enough to cover food, rent, and necessities. So you end up going on SNAP. And also, the SNAP program does have work requirements, and it's called the Able-Bodied Adults Without Dependents. And it has the acronym ABAWD. So unless you're exempt, you must work at least 80 hours a month or 30 hours a week to continue to receive benefits. So most people who are in this program end up juggling a whole bunch of part-time jobs, trying to make ends meet. But again, the math does not math, right? So now we're in the situation where we've got this shutdown. And now the stability of SNAP is threatened because of the fact that the government is just out of business right now, right? So the fact that Congress did not pass a funding bill, the USDA, remember the people that administer the SNAP program, announced that, well, sorry, we're not going to be able to make payments as of November 1st, which means literally at the drop of a hat, 42 million people are now not going to be able to eat. For real. This is a huge crisis. So, of course, over 24 attorney generals and other interested parties filed a lawsuit listen, this is not okay. The administration, of course, is over here saying, well, we don't have the legal authority to move money into this program and this and that. No. There's already a contingency fund. There's already backup money to be able to cover the shortfall for SNAP until the government reopens and Congress passes a funding bill. So this is called congressionally appropriated, and it's a contingency fund that is specifically set aside to ensure the program could continue its operations if there is a funding lapse. So basically, it's like a little rainy day fund just for SNAP. So this coalition sued the administration, basically being like the administration's refusal to use the contingency funds was unlawful and was arbitrary and capricious under the Administrative Procedure Act. So 2 federal judges ruled almost simultaneously, one in the U.S. District Court for Massachusetts and one in the U.S. District Court in Rhode Island, saying that, listen, USDA, you've got to pay that money. So they've got to use the contingency funds that have been set aside for that purpose. So again, not understanding why they even tried to go down that road. But anyway, the courts basically were like, listen, the law requires you to use the money that Congress set aside for this exact scenario. So the administration at this point is supposed to be basically reversing course and making sure to release this funding. But we're getting conflicting messages as to whether or not this administration is going to comply, which, if they don't, could push this up to the Supreme Court. So at the end of the day, The legal principle here is clear. The structure that was created by law for SNAP ensured that the money was always going to be available, even if Congress delays its appropriations for whatever reason. So the USDA can't ignore their legal duty to make sure 42 million Americans eat, especially when the money's available. So even though this is a complex program and there's lots of rules and everything else, at the end of the day, it's not a handout. It's something to be able to just give a boost to people, to low-wage workers, to make sure kids are fed and not going to school hungry. Make sure that local economies can still thrive because, again, if people aren't out here buying food, stores are going to be impacted and all of that. So this is better for our communities. And the estimate is that with every $1 of SNAP benefits, that $1 generates $1.50 to $1.80 in economic activity. So it ends up generating more money for the community, for everyone to benefit. So, and even with all of this, families are still finding it hard to make ends meet. And now we're seeing the issue of the layoffs in government, people getting fired for, not having the right viewpoint, corporate sectors laying off people, especially as a result of new technology, AI, making some jobs obsolete. And also to lay on top of all of this, you have the federal employees who are working through this shutdown and aren't going to get a paycheck. So they will not necessarily qualify for SNAP, but in the interim, what can we do to make sure folks who are basically food insecure can get what they need, that families can get the food that they need? So I'm going to suggest that everyone look up their local food bank, the food bank that's down your block, in your community, whatever, and donate to them, whether it be money, whether it be canned goods, because these food banks are starting to see long lines all around the country as a result of the shutdown and the economic issues that we're having right now. So whatever the government decides to do, even though they have been ordered to release that money and make sure people eat, the underlying issue of food insecurity is not going away anytime soon. So the way that we can help our neighbors, donate to your local food bank. So what are your thoughts on the SNAP program? And did you learn something from this video? How does this make you feel, especially in looking at the drama around the government shutdown? Do you know somebody who is a beneficiary of SNAP and they're working full time? Sound off in the comments below. Let me know what you think. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for all things legal and political here at Legal AF. And of course, follow me on socials because I am Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and this was The Breakdown. Stay safe, stay informed, and keep demanding justice. Take care.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.